What's up? Recently, I actually injured my wrist at gymnastics doing something really stupid. However, as someone who trains calisthenics, a lot of exercises that we do are compound exercises, so it's really hard to isolate muscles if you're injured, especially if you injure like your wrist or your elbows or your shoulders. However, in this video, I'm going to show you how you can work around some injuries with calisthenics, and I'm going to show you some ways that you can avoid getting injured as much as possible. So working around injuries can either be really easy or really difficult. It really just depends on the injury that you have. In my case, my wrist, I can bend it perfectly fine like this. However, as soon as I go into extension, bending it back, that's where I get a bit more discomfort and pain. So an easy way that I work around it is if I can just keep my wrist neutral, in a neutral position, I could very easily still do pull-ups pain-free, and that's a very easy way to work around an injury with my wrist. And another way that I can still just work around my injury is by just using parallettes, because parallettes pretty much lets you keep your wrist in neutral position anyways. So in my case, pretty simple to work around. However, if you have something like an elbow injury or like your shoulder, you gotta be a bit more selective with the way you work around your injury. So with the majority of minor injuries, just try and play around with some basic calisthenic movements. If push-ups and pull-ups still feel a little weird, you can try doing an easier variation. Just try and do some like knee push-ups or do some incline push-ups. And if pull-ups feel a little bit different, maybe just hanging, or maybe try Australian pull-ups. So just try and figure out, try and use some different equipment, try and do some easier variations of some calisthenics exercises. It all just depends on like how really injured are you. If it's like a minor injury like mine, it's pretty easy to work around with some basic calisthenics. If it's in a more sensitive spot like your elbow or your shoulders, which is pretty much being used for all upper body calisthenic movements, there are still some ways you can work around it that I'll show you right now. I know some calisthenics athletes might hate this, but if you have an injury, you can't really seem to be able to do any pain-free movements. In my opinion, I think it's very important to use some weights. I know, pretty crazy, right? Calisthenics athletes trying to use weights. Weights are super beneficial if you're trying to isolate movements, because with calisthenics, it is so hard to isolate certain muscle groups because everything is just compound movement. That's where I usually tend to lean towards. If I do have an injury and I can't really train calisthenics, I will use weights. I can still get some exercise in, so I don't have to be like lazy and sit on my butt throughout the whole day because I can't do calisthenics. And it can honestly be pretty simple. So if you have an injury on your shoulder, which is by far probably the most common injury with most calisthenics athletes, if you can't seem to do any pushing or pulling movements, something pretty simple that you can do with weights is just by doing any curl variation, bicep curl, hammer curl, reverse curls. You can still train your arms, you know, your biceps, your forearms. You can still strengthen your elbow tendons with just some free weights, and you can keep your shoulder in a pretty neutral position. As you recover, you can still get some blood flowing, get some muscle activation with just some weights, especially if you have a shoulder injury where you can't move it too much. So now, if you have an injury on your elbow, this one can be pretty tricky. You know, I've had my fair share of like golfer's elbow, tennis elbow. You know, I've had it all. Even though I don't play tennis or golf at all, I'm pretty poo at it. You can still overuse your elbow tendons pretty easily with a lot of the calisthenic movements because, you know, like I said, pretty much everything goes through your elbows. What I do if I get like golfer's elbow or tennis elbow, I'll use weights as well, and I would work on wrist curls because, you know, if my wrist ain't injured, your elbow stays in a neutral position, and when you work out, you know, your forearms with wrist curls, it can actually strengthen your elbows. So it's like I would say that's probably like the best way to train your elbow when it's injured. This goes without saying, I'm only speaking from experience. I've been training calisthenics for almost 3 years, and I've had my fair share of injuries, but these are just the things that I do have actually helped out. So let's say you can't work out with weights because maybe you don't have any weights, or you just can't, your injury doesn't allow you, and you can't do any calisthenics, or you just have some injury on your upper body and you can't do any calisthenics. You know what you can do? This might be even more controversial than using weights, but you can still train your legs. Man, I know that is pretty hard to do for some calisthenics athletes, but if you are injured on your upper body and you can't seem to train it, you can still do bodyweight leg exercises. Trust me, if you do bodyweight calisthenics, you know, pistol squats, sissy squats, dragon squats, any squat variations, if you have bigger legs, and getting big legs is really hard. I've tried. My legs are not very big, but I still train them very often. But that's what you can do. You just can't work out your upper body because your injury is just so bad, you can still work around it by letting it recover and just training your lower body. Work out your legs a little bit. If you don't want to train your legs and your upper body is injured, you can still do super simple to keep your body movement, and that's just walking. If I'm injured, I don't really like just doing absolutely nothing. So quickly, before I tell you some ways that you can increase the speed of your injury recovery, you should hit that subscribe button. We're almost at 3,000 subscribers, which is absolutely amazing. I truly appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. The community we got on this channel is absolutely amazing. You guys are all so freaking cool. Yeah, it just makes me so happy. So yeah, if you haven't already, you should subscribe. I truly appreciate it. There are some things that you can do to assist your body to help recover your injuries a little bit faster. That way you can go back to training, which is the most important part. So these obviously depend on, you know, the type of injury that you have, but these are just some things that I do. First thing is just doing some light mobility work in the area of the injury. So take my wrist, for example. I'll do some light wrist curls. I'll do some wrist circles. Just get some movement going. Just really emphasize light because I like to just move it a little bit, nowhere near getting close to, like, you know, pain at all. You don't really want to push yourself too hard, but just, you know, get some blood flowing, get some movement in there. If it's like your shoulders, you know, do some arm circles, do some shrugs, just anything, just get some movement in there, get some blood flowing. The second thing that I do, depending if it's like bruising or swelling, I try to ice it because the coldness of the ice retracts blood flow to reduce the amount of swelling and bruising. I usually just reserve the icing for, you know, things that are swelling, things that are bruising. And then for the third thing, complete opposite of icing, which is using something warm to bring some blood flow in. That's what the heat really does. So if you get like what I use is, I don't know what you call them, I call them like a hot water bottle, fill it up with warm water. I roll my wrist around it to bring some blood flow to it because that's what the heat does. It attracts some more blood flow. And if I let it sit there for a little bit, my wrist feels a bit better. Try that with different areas, see if that works. And then the fourth thing, which is what you should be doing even if you're not injured, and that is just making sure you get sleep. This is pretty basic. In your sleep is when you recover at most. So just make sure you get your sleep in. That is the best way to recover from most of your injuries, is just having a good night's sleep. So now that I've shown you some ways that you can work around certain injuries with calisthenics or with some weights, and some ways that you can increase the recovery time of certain injuries, it is also important for when you do fully recover that you do some of these exercises to help make sure that you don't get injured again. There are just some muscle groups that are very crucial to overall performance and muscular stability that calisthenics exercises just can't seem to really hit very effectively. A good example of that would be the rotator cuff. So doing some external rotation with a resistance band is very difficult to do with calisthenics, and the rotator cuff is very crucial to your overall shoulder health. So it's very important that you actually train it to make it as strong as possible so you don't tear it by accident by doing, you know, weighted pull-ups or something. And another area that's really crucial that I've already mentioned in this video would be your elbow exercise. You can definitely strengthen your forearms. You can get really strong forearms with just, you know, doing a lot of weighted pull-ups. However, if you just supplement with some weights to do a bit more wrist flexion and extension to target different areas of your forearm to strengthen your elbow tendons, it can really help you in the long run of calisthenics to make sure you don't get injured in your elbow again. So if you just take some of these exercises to strengthen some of these weak points that a lot of calisthenics athletes tend to have because they just can't really target them. That way you can really make sure you can bulletproof your whole body to prevent these injuries from happening again. So even if you aren't injured right now, hopefully this video has been helpful to you. And if you are injured, I wish you a speedy recovery. And as soon as my wrist is back to 100%, I will get back to making dope videos. But thank you, I truly appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. If you haven't already, you should watch this video where I teach my girlfriend how to do a handstand in only 30 days. Definitely one of my most favorite videos. Super dope, super fun. But yeah, once again, thank you so much for watching this video. I truly appreciate it, and peace out.